Hello, and welcome to today's installment of our webcast series, Sustainability Watch. I'm Uwe Schulte, the leader of the Conference Board Sustainability Center, and I bid you a very warm welcome. Today, we're going to talk about how to build sustainability-based brand equity. And with this exciting story, we have two very experienced panelists. But before we get to that point, I would like to make you familiar with some of the housekeeping points of our webcast. First of all, at any point in time, please feel free to ask questions or make comments. In order to do so, you have on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen a chat box where you can type your question or your comment, and we will respond to it as the flow of the webcast allows us to do so. Also, the presentation you're going to see today during the discussions we have, all those slides you can download in the box next to that chat box. And there is also a PDF on frequently asked questions. If at any point in time you would like to see more details on the slides, you can move them to full screen mode. For that, on top of the slides, you see 4 arrows pointing outwards. If you click on those, you will be able to look at the slides in full screen mode. By clicking again, you go back to this screen as it is now. And please feel free, if you like this webcast or you think it's interesting for your colleagues, to share that link with them. The webcast will be available for download at probably already tomorrow. Okay, so much for that. You can earn CPE credits for watching this webcast. In order to do so, you have to stay on the webcast the whole time. And when the prompt comes up, you have to click. This is 3 times throughout the webcast, and you have to provide, to start with, your name and email address. This feature is, of course, only available for the live webcast and not for the streaming one. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started, and I would like to introduce our panelists. First of all, welcome to Denise Dahlhoff, the senior researcher of the Conference Board. Hello.
Hello, great to be here, and I look forward to our conversation.
And I would also like to say welcome to our illustrious guest from Disney, and we're very pleased to have you, Rick.
Hello, everyone. Welcome from the most magical place on earth.
Wonderful. Thank you. So Denise is the senior researcher for consumer research at the Conference Board. She was previously the research director at Wharton School for Baker Retailing Center. And Denise's experience include qualitative and quantitative market-related research for academic and also consulting projects. She is also a senior fellow at Wharton School of Lauder Institute for Management and International Studies. She holds a PhD in marketing from the University of Jena in Germany, and a Master of Liberal Arts and a Master of Philosophy in Liberal Arts, both from the University of Pennsylvania. Rick leads the Consumer Insight Organization for Disney Parks, Experiences and Products, and the scope of Rick's role includes future foresight, market trends, new product development, testing, demand estimation, brand equity studies, marketing effectiveness assessment, social listening, guest experience measurements, and key business driver analytics. Rick received a master's degree in engineering management from the University of Central Florida and a bachelor's degree in industrial and systems engineering from the University of Florida. Rick is a member of our Conference Board Market Insights Council, which of course is one of the many peer exchange councils the Conference Board is offering, and we're very pleased to have you as a member there, Rick. So let's get started. Denise, I understand you have more or less finished a large study, a global study on consumer perception of sustainability. And the report is going to be due out, I think, in December. but I'm very pleased that you said you would share with us some of your experiences. This is in the context of the Global Sustainability Center, which before we get started on the content, would like to very briefly explain why we're offering what we're offering here in the Sustainability Watch. We also have a sustainability blog, and we have, of course, a lot of research. And we offer these webcasts, and we're very pleased to have today two people from the consumer experience side. We have also shared, of course, things with tax experts, with diversity and inclusion experts, as the sustainability agenda is, of course, very wide. And we want to provide long-term value and positive impact through sustainability integration. And we're doing that hopefully with timely and thought-provoking and relevant research. If you're interested in the center, then please contact me at any point in time. Enough about this now, and over to you, Denise. We're really, really interested in your findings.
Well, thank you so much, Uwe. So I am excited to share our research that we did earlier this year. This is actually based on research in 64 countries with consumers, and we did an online survey in these countries. And our objective was really to understand people's attitudes about sustainability, how they even define sustainability, because the term is used for so many different initiatives. Also what their expectations are of certain business sectors, as well as policymakers, and so forth. Like, for example, have they switched brands because of sustainability features? So let's have a look at some of our findings. So the first question is, as I mentioned, sustainability is used for so many things. It has become an umbrella term. However, we wanted to know from consumers what they think of that term, what they associate with it. And here are the dimensions that we provided. And you'll see that dimensions relating to the environment, like environment, recycling, alternative sources of energy, pollution, and climate change, they really bubble to the top across the world. Versus other dimensions that are more socially oriented, like fair price and fair labor conditions, they came out lower. And this we're looking at the global values. Of course, there are regional differences. So you see, for example, the environment is #1 in Asia Pacific, but only #4 in Middle East and Africa. And I'll share in a second the regional differences. But this can, the differences can be, the reason for these differences can be either it's innate in the culture, there is more of an interest in one of these dimensions, either the environment or social. It can also be a reflection of companies' initiatives in these different regions and or media messages as well. So let's look at the next slide, where this shows a summary of the different dimensions. And you see that in North America and Asia Pacific, the environmental understanding of sustainability is much stronger than in other regions, versus in Europe and Middle East and Africa, for example, where the social understanding of sustainability is much stronger. So this goes to show it's really, really important to know what kinds of associations people have in different regions with sustainability, for companies to really tailor their strategies by region. And related to that, we also have done research where we ask
Denise, sorry for interrupting you.
Sure.
Just for understanding of that graph, it shows the deviation from the mean. That means when we have more social or more environmental, it doesn't mean that the other dimension isn't featured as well. It's just which one is the dominant one. Is that correct if I assume that?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. So this is just relative to other regions. So you see, like North America, for example, is relatively stronger to other regions on on the environment. However, there's also still like a social, as you see on the previous slide, if you look at North America. So yeah, the social dimension, fair price and fair labor conditions, rank 5th and 7th. So yes, they are still represented. However, the dominant perception is environmental. Your interpretation was right on spot. So related to this, we have this quarterly global survey where we ask people what their main concerns are. And one of the most consistent findings we have seen over the last several quarters, in fact, across the world, is that the concern for global warming has really consistently gone up across the world. And that is, consistent with our finding that sustainability is understood in an environmental thing. So people may be paying more attention to that dimension. It's not to say that the social dimension is less important. In fact, I would expect that will increase as well with all the transparency going on, people sharing it on social media and people, looking more behind the scenes, so behind the curtain, so to speak, and news spreading fast. So not to be neglected, but, the concern for the environment is definitely real.
Okay, thank you so much for this first glimpse at your results. I would like to take the opportunity to ask Rick, when you see this presentation from Denise, does that resonate with your own findings?
It does. Much of what Denise shared has been echoed in proprietary work that we have completed as part of our consumer foresight efforts to understand not just where the consumer is today, but where they are going. And one of the key themes that has emerged has been this rise in what we refer to as conscience among the consumer. And under that increased level of consciousness is what we call ethical living, where we see consumers being much more thoughtful and deliberate about their choices that they're making in their lives and with which brands they're interacting. And of course, they're doing that with unprecedented levels of information and choice. So it's very important for a brand like ours to deeply understand that and assure that we are aligning our efforts to that, particularly in an era where consumers are not just looking to make wise choices themselves, but they become very activist-oriented and are holding others accountable for positive change. And that includes brands. And, there's certainly been ample examples around the world of that quick fire activism, the call out culture, where even just one misstep can do great harm to a brand if it's something that the consumer identifies and then begins to use social media and so forth to spread their opinion about. So it's something we're very cognizant of. From a regional standpoint, our work also aligns much with what you saw with Denise. When it comes to sustainability in particular, we see that most dominant in our key markets, which are the United States, Latin America, Asia, and in some areas of Europe. But very consistent with what we've found.
Well, thank you so much, Rick. That is very interesting. We'll listen a little bit more to what Denise has found, and then we come back to your experience. Denise, what is it that businesses are expecting? Consumers are expecting from businesses. And before you answer the question, I would like to point out to the audience, you can please also ask questions. Just use the little chat box on the left bottom corner of the screen, and we will endeavor to reply to you. Okay, Denise, over to you again.
Sure. So Rick already mentioned consumers' expectations, and that's exactly what we wanted to know. We were interested in knowing what kinds of business sectors and also policymakers consumers expect to do the most regarding global sustainability. And here are our results. Again, this is sorted by the global overall ranking. And there tiers developed in the ranking. So at the top, you see the government as well as United Nations in the first and third spot. So these are policymakers. Obviously, they have a big hand in making sustainability happen. They have the tools. However, we also see technology, at number 2. So which shows that people are expecting the technology sector to be, an instrument for making sustainability happen. Of course, technology, that can mean many things. It can be technology for, let's say, protecting the environment, helping with air pollution and other things, but also in the sense of software and apps and devices. If you again think of the social dimension, for example, giving access to the unbanked or giving free cell phones to certain populations, providing Wi-Fi and so forth. So all that goes to sustainability. But again, the top tier is generally policymakers. The second tier is industrial sectors. If you look at it, food manufacturers, automakers, pharmaceuticals, utility providers, home builders, home appliance makers, airlines, as well as clothing manufacturers. All these industrial sectors have a more of an environmental footprint, which is probably why people expect them to do more for sustainability. And then at the bottom, we have service sectors. Restaurants, financial institutions, hotels, and retailers, which of course don't have as much of an environmental footprint probably in the perception of consumers, which is why they might have ended up lower on this list. It doesn't mean that people have, lower expectations. It's just relative to all these other institutions that were in the survey, industrial sectors as well as policymakers. And again, there are regional differences. For example, in the US, or rather in North America, which consists of the US and Canada, we see, for example, that utility providers rank very high. They're number 2. And that can be explained probably because people receive a lot of communication from utility providers about clean energy and the choices we have, as well as, offers for energy consulting to save energy or to receive real-time measurements of your energy usage so you can change it. So it's all like these positive messages, and that's probably what is reflected in here. So this was our first question, what are your expectations? But we also wanted to know, how do you perceive these sectors' performances on sustainability? And this is the ranking that we got. And interestingly, technology ranks number 1. So they are perceived as the best performing sector when it comes to sustainability. Then we have our policymakers in places 2 and 3, United Nations and government. But the interesting thing is, if you remember from the previous slide, the government was actually number 1 across the world in terms of expectations. But here, in terms of performance, they come out as number 3. So clearly, the government is not delivering to consumers' expectations. Let me show you actually the next slide, which is actually the comparison of these two, expectations versus perceived performance. And you see this is ranked by performance, so technology in number 1. And the color coding is the blue cells is where a sector delivers above what was expected in terms of their rank. And the red ones is where consumers expected this sector to be higher in terms of performance, but when it comes to their perception of performance, this sector is lower. So let's look at the top again. Technology and United Nations seem to over-deliver, as well as financial institutions, home appliance makers, and then also some of the service businesses, like retailers, as well as hotels, actually by a lot. So that's quite interesting to see, to compare expectations versus performance. And for example, being at the bottom of the list again doesn't mean that people don't care. In fact, you see here hotels have done so much regarding sustainability, from reusing towels to reducing plastic, these little plastic bottles, getting rid of plastic bottles even to for drinking water, and many other initiatives. But it seems like people see that, and they see that they are actually over-delivering on expectations.
That is quite interesting, and I think that leads us to one branch of yours, Rick, which is of course hotels and services. You have a similar perception?
Yeah, we do. We have found, and as you're seeing here, a little bit of an excerpt from our published commitment to corporate responsibility, which you can find online. We have a broad commitment to both social and environmental responsibility. And one example of that would be within our resort or hotel businesses. Water conservation is a major focus. And so we've made a commitment back in 2013 to, in spite of what continues to be substantial expansion of our hotels around the world, to assure that we stayed at current levels of water consumption. And we're excited that we've overachieved on that commitment. And one of the ways we've done that, some of you may have encountered it in your travels, is to offer guests an option, opt out of the full daily service where every towel is cleaned and replaced with clean towels, sheets, etc., because that turns out to be the major source of water consumption in hotels. So that is something that we do among many other initiatives. And in general, we find Denise's work that consumers assume that brands like Disney are doing the right thing. And so perhaps unlike other brands who may be more challenged, we get a lot of credit from the consumer. And in fact, they often aren't able to articulate specifically what we're doing, because this type of information you're looking at here is not something we lead with in our advertising or something like that. But when we ask them, they just assume we're doing the right thing for the most part.
Rick, you've just raised a point that is a point of contention with a lot of hotels for me, and I think it has something to do with how you deal with your brand. I'm very excited about that. You say, we're giving something back when you do that, because we are really interested in reducing the water consumption. I quite often feel that hotels are saying to people, don't throw your towel on the floor, leave it there, and then you're going to do something good for the environment. But I think consumers look through that. It's also a cost saving, of course, and therefore the way you do it, it becomes a clear commitment to the environment. I quite like that, I must say.
Yeah, and to your point, we also recognize that it could at times look a bit self-serving. So in that example, we complement it with an actual gift card back to the guest. So in essence, we share in the savings that we achieve. Because to your point, we want to be as authentic as we can be about it, not only have initiatives where they could be perceived as self-serving.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. Denise, that leads us to that question. When we look at your findings, what does that actually mean for a brand? A lot of people look at these things from a risk perspective, and of course there are risks attached to the brand. But when I look at your numbers, I see opportunities. How does that come out?
Yeah, for sure. Sustainability obviously has a lot to do with compliance as well, but we're looking at it from the marketing perspective and from consumers. And I thought it was really interesting that Rick, you mentioned that your customers assume that you're doing the right thing, and apparently you do, by giving out credit cards or gift cards for the savings. But sustainability really is an opportunity to build brand equity through, by being innovative, by differentiating from competitors, and most importantly, by making people feel good about their consumption choices. So if you offer these environmental initiatives or social initiatives, people feel good about patronizing the brand. They also can self-express by, feeling part of a community, feeling belonging, emotional attachment, like all those psychological aspects of buying a certain brand. And that also leads to commitment and even advocacy to other people. So people commit to the brand, they are more loyal, they repeat buy, they tell their friends about it, they post on social media, they recommend to others. And that ultimately leads then to brand equity, because you're a differentiated brand. You have repeat buyers. People have a higher willingness to pay if they value all these sustainability attributes. Word of mouth brings in new business. Market share is higher. That gives clout with distribution partners, and also creates brand extension potential. So thinking of sustainability not as a, just compliance or even like a cost generator, but really this is like a value, can be a big value driver. But again, it goes again back to the point about know your customers. What do they care about? How do they, what are their associations with sustainability, to be able to cater to those interests and preferences.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Would you share that point of view, Rick? That there is huge opportunity to build on that and combine the impact attempts, the positive impact attempts companies make with brand equity?
Absolutely. I mean, that is really our fundamental strategy. It's, I think in the early days, so to speak, there might have been a focus on developing brand trust, that Disney's doing the right thing. But we have learned through much of our work that if you really want to drive brand passion and have consumers crave your brand, you need to develop a deep emotional connection or deep emotional attachment, as Denise has identified here. And for us, we focus on doing that in a myriad of ways. As I mentioned, we don't typically lead off with all the stats around the fact that, 2 of our 4 theme parks in Florida are now solar powered by the way, the only solar farm I'm aware of that from the air looks like Mickey Mouse. So even there, we took a little whimsy with it. But, that's not typically what we found drives the consumer behavior that Denise identified is ultimately very important to us. So instead, we went back to what is our brand equity? What are we known for? What gives us mission to be in consumers' lives? And what we consistently hear is that we are master storytellers. That nobody can tell and engage someone in a story quite like Disney. Whether those stories are the classic Disney, or Star Wars, or Marvel, or now National Geographic, which has a lot of great brand equity when it comes to sustainability. But nonetheless, that's where we've decided to really focus. And it's not new. You may or may not be aware that as far back as the late 1940s, Disney was producing what was called the True Life Adventure series. And these were some of the first family-friendly educational documentaries on nature. And they were used in classrooms, around the country and around the world. We now have Disney Nature, who are releasing and producing and releasing 1 theatrical film a year that's released globally. And as I mentioned, we have National Geographic. All of these give us a platform to be authentic to who we are as storytellers, but to take that brand equity and extend it into sustainability. And in our case, by sharing inspiring, relevant stories with the world that elevate their awareness of issues that are important to them. So that's I think our particular niche. I think every brand has to look at it differently. I was recently struck by, I don't know if anyone on the call might be from KLM, but the world's first commercial airline now has a campaign, targeted around flying responsibly, and at different points actually says things like consider the train. So they don't always seem commercially intuitive, perhaps, but I think every brand has to identify where they are in the consumer's mind and heart, and then pivot your sustainability efforts off that.
That's a really interesting way to do it. Sorry to chime in.
Please go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's really it's an interesting way to do it, to identify what is your brand known for, and then tie that to people's interest in sustainability to then extend those known features of the brand to sustainability.
But it's certainly what our work has echoed, and it wasn't without us, exploring some of maybe the other alternatives. But often, frankly, we were making some substantial investments in areas that when we talked to our consumers about it, we heard more of I sort of assumed you were doing the right thing. One would be a responsible sourcing of products in our consumer products division. Ultimately, what they told us is, I absolutely assume and count on you doing the right thing, but that's really not going to make a difference in how I perceive or behave when it comes to your product. But if we can make the packaging not just maybe recyclable, but what if the packaging becomes part of the product and becomes part of the story that the product tells, or maybe it's even its own product, kind of separate from what you thought you were buying, then people are like, wow, that's something only Disney could do and would do. So it is interesting that I don't think you can just take the checklist of corporate responsibility initiatives and sort of check them off and necessarily create that emotional attachment you might be looking for with your consumer.
This is, I think, a very, very important point. And in our work, we have seen that companies have moved from what I would call, in all honesty, a box ticking exercise. Yeah, so you looked at some things that people were looking at, water and energy and child labor and what have you, and boxes were ticked, but they weren't in relation with their core products. And of course, if you're in branded products with your brand. And what you've just described is of course how you make sure that your ability and your capabilities and the expectations from your consumers are aligned and synchronized. And I think this is extremely important to build trust and to maintain trust, because of course it is wonderful, like it is in your case, to have that attitude to say, we're expecting that from you anyway. But if you then don't do that, that might have, of course, an adverse effect. And maybe that leads us to another point in your study, Denise, about how people react to these things.
Sure. So another topic that we wanted to explore in our research is whether sustainability features, and those include both environmental as well as social ones, have ever made people switch brands. And this is what we found. This is a busy chart, but let me break it down for you. So we have like these blue colored lines and the red orangey type lines. So the blue lines show when people have switched brands because they were attracted by something of a different brand that they really liked, either an environmental aspect or a social cause that this brand promoted. And the other two lines, the yellowish peachy one and the red one, show when people have been turned off by the brand that they usually buy because they didn't like either the social position that the brand took or because they lacked fair labor or fair wage practices. So the first takeaway is, as you see, the blue lines are higher than the other lines, means that the strength of being attracted by something positive is higher than than being turned away by something. So people are more likely to switch brands because they really like an aspect of a different brand than to switch away from their habitual brand, because they might be a little reluctant to do that. You also see that there are, again, regional differences. You see that the percentages are much higher for Asia Pacific and Latin America, meaning that the consumers in these regions have switched brands more for these sustainability aspects, both on the positive side as well as turning away from brands. So you could argue, they are paying more attention to these aspects. It might be more important to them. Another interesting takeaway from here is that the most switching, the darker blue line, generally has caused the most switching. So again, this aspect of environmental aspects being really attractive to people, even making them switch brands. And then I want to point out the yellowish peachy line, which is switching because of a lack of fair labor and wage. So you can see that's actually, those are pretty substantial amounts here, that people that have switched brands because they didn't like the labor practices that they learned about from brands. And my expectation would be that that might even increase in the future as people are, more critical. As Rick said, they are very interested in knowing more about what companies are doing. So that's definitely something that, and of course, companies do great things, and we've seen in a different section of our research that it's often just an awareness or educational issue. So companies can take this as an opportunity to proactively communicate about their, fair labor practices, their, what they're doing more on the, on the supply end of their activities. So to educate people. And the other interesting thing, or the other interesting topic here is, people talk so much about brands being activist and taking a stance on social causes. We have the two lines here, the light blue and the red one, show you how people have been attracted by these kinds of activities or being turned away. Again, this is the light blue line and the red line. Again, you see that people are, the power of attracting people by, standing for something that people really like, is bigger than people turning away. However, even here, it's a pretty substantial amount of people that have switched brands because they didn't like the social position. So this is really like a tightrope walk, taking a stance. You can gain a lot. There is an upside. However, you really, really have to know your audience, and that includes consumers as well as employees now. And as Rick has, shared before, it really has to fit the brand. Like taking a stance on a social issue has to fit the brand positioning. So that would be the takeaway here.
And that is interesting, Denise, because we all know the case of burned sneakers in the US. So the red line would be the burners, and the blue line would be those who were attracted by the stance the company has taken. Is that the way to read that slide?
That's exactly right. And you mentioned, you mentioned the burning the sneakers, which my perception has been that was more concentrated in the US. So that would be North America. And the interesting piece about this is that you see more people have turned away from a brand because of their social stance than they have turned away because of a lack of fair labor or fair wage practices, which is quite interesting. So people being really passionate about those kinds of things and taking action.
there are some underlying trends in this slide. Yeah, so there's different brand loyalty, I guess, in different regions, and there's also a more or less polarized society as well. Those things play a role in this as well. But if we get back to the case of the sneakers, as far as I know, overall the brand profited a lot from the blue line rather than suffering from the red line.
Yeah. I have seen statistics, how certain sales went up or stock prices went up.
They first went down, interesting enough, but that didn't last very long. So the point I think here is that the point you made is the most important one. It has to be in line with the brand values and the company's values. If you put something on top of something else which it doesn't fit, then actually you probably get more of the red line, I would think. Yeah?
It is that, and it's also probably a waste of resources, in addition to confusing consumers. Like you shouldn't be a news office commenting on the daily news, as they relate to your brand. However, if there's something that authentically connects to the brand, that is relevant to any aspect of what you're doing, then it appears authentic that brands would speak out. And there's also research now if there are issues that are really related to the core of the brand and a brand stays silent, people wonder why that is. That raises questions like, do they have something to hide? Why don't they speak out? So it's seen a little bit as inauthentic. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Just being silent on anything, like as a policy, may not be the best strategy either.
Let's ask Rick. Do you share this view, or have you similar experience?
Yeah, I mean, specific to the data we're looking at here, we came at it a little bit differently, but I think it reinforces the same point. In our work, we found that 1 in 3 of our consumers said they had taken an active action in the marketplace as a result of their perception of a brand's commitment to sustainability and social responsibility. So 1 in 3 saying they took an action. I don't think we diagnosed it quite as detailed as this. Did they leave a brand or go to a brand? But so that certainly gets any commercial leader's attention, because that's a large segment of the market, of course. And as far as, taking a position, et cetera, it is something that I think, frankly, we're still figuring out. I think for years, we were fortunate, maybe because we were in an industry that wasn't under the microscope by consumers or regulators, that we could spend a lot of time in the neutral zone and not really, take a stand one way or the other on things. And people respected that even. Consumers would tell us, I come to Disney to get away from all that. I'm not looking for you to make a statement one way or the other. As we do our foresight work, though, we are seeing, particularly with the younger generation, a very different attitude about that, to Denise's point, an expectation that all brands stand for something. And so what we've done is gone out and identify, again, based on our proven brand equity, what are those things that we really do stand for? And a great example is we stand for family, right? I mean, that's been in our brand since the beginning. So then we will tend to focus our efforts on issues and topics that are relevant to families everywhere. So that might be, family support organizations, excuse me. It might be getting involved with after-school programs. One that we found is particularly important to our local communities where our businesses operate is making sure that the community understands the economic opportunity we're providing to families in the area. And so we have partnerships with daycare type services and so forth. We recently announced the Aspire program, where our cast members can pursue college education in any topic they want, and we'll pay for it. It doesn't have to be related to your current role or anything like that. If your dream, is to be, make it up, a pastry chef, you may not be working in food and beverage here, but we'll send you to pastry chef school. So, things that we feel like align with that core brand that we represent of families and frankly, optimism and hope are, equities that you hear when you talk to consumers about Disney, is where, again, we try to focus our efforts.
Very clear. Thank you so much, Rick. Denise, I understand you drilled a little bit deeper into this activism question and the motivation for doing purchases. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, sure. So we wanted to know, as we said, it can be a tightrope walk. What is a barrier for people to buy brands that take strong positions on social topics? And so when you look at number one here, there is the people don't want to pay a higher price. They're afraid that they are paying for all this activism. And by the way, as a side note, we have seen that for other aspects of sustainability as well, such as fair labor, as well as environmental aspects. So people expect to pay a higher price, and that's a barrier for them. So we see that consistently, and this is reflected here as well. But then when you look at the items that are in the blue box, these are all items that in one way or another say that brands should not take a stance on, that's not their business to take a stance on social topics. So they in general think that I do not believe brands should take social positions, or they don't want to appear to be endorsing a brand's social position by their purchases, or they often disagree with the social positions that the brands take. So all these regions, and this is almost half, it's about 45% of consumers with regional variation. For example, in Asia Pacific, this is much stronger. In some of the European countries like France and Switzerland, it was lower. But the takeaway is that some people just generally don't want to have to deal with that, to appear, to be endorsing like a certain brand, or disagree or don't like that in general, keeping their politics and their commercial actions separate. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. I would agree with.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Before you go on. When I look at those numbers, maybe I'm reading it wrong, but if 12% say I don't believe, would that mean that 88% say they do?
No, so these are all reasons why people would not buy a brand that takes a strong position on a social topic. So these are all the sort of the negative reasons.
So it's not a yes or no question. It is a question. This one. So when do you agree, and that was a multiple choice basically. Yeah?
Exactly, and pick the biggest barrier for you to buy a brand that takes a position on a social topic.
Yeah, I thought we needed to clarify that.
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely. To Rick's point, Rick said that younger people are expecting brands to speak out on social topics. My guess is that because of that, my guess is that these numbers will actually go down. That people will be more comfortable with brands taking social positions. So this might go down in the future. But still the point holds, it's something to be really careful and cautious about, to consider the brand and the audience, and then before chiming in on social topics.
Okay. Thank you. So, Rick, from your perspective, when we look at the total picture that Denise was painting at the moment, which would be the most important aspects for Disney from that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I take away that last piece is a bit validating. We certainly don't want to be oblivious to what might be emerging in the marketplace, but it's taking a stand on social causes is not something a brand like ours would want to get too aggressive on too quickly. And so, I think it's a sobering reminder of tread cautiously if you're going to go there. And we've certainly looked at organizations, outside companies that have done it. Some successfully, but many have had to retrace their steps and so forth. So, what you're looking at here would be a good example, though. We don't have any issue coming out and saying we're committed to the planet, right? And I don't know if you would consider that a social cause or an environmental cause, but so we think there's plenty of opportunity for taking a position and being authentic about commitments you've made as a brand, without necessarily perhaps getting into those causes that might be more polarizing. So it's a tread carefully type approach. But to me, the world I live in, fortunately, I'm not in our public affairs department. I'm in the consumer insight department. So I just get to talk to consumers directly about it and focus on what's going to help improve that emotional connection and drive consumers to crave our brand. Go beyond trust it, respect it, admire it, but crave it. I want everything Disney all the time, every day in my life. And that, when we find the intersection between those things and things that we believe are the right thing to stand for, that's when you get the real energy. And this would be an example that consumers, as I mentioned, with our legacy of nature films, with our Disney's Animal Kingdom theme park and so forth, and now with National Geographic, part of the Disney family, consumers this resonated very strongly with them. Like, well, of course Disney would be committed to the planet. I'd love to hear more about what Disney's doing in regard to that commitment, which might be the ultimate litmus test. If when you tell consumers you're committed to something and they don't express a lot of interest in knowing more about it, in our case, sourcing or responsible sourcing might have been an example of that. That was probably a clue to us that this wasn't creating an emotional connection. But if instead, when you share a commitment and consumers are craving more information about it and even want to know how they can participate and support that cause and so forth, that's probably a good sign that you're onto something.
Ricky, all the programs you mentioned, it actually reminds me of another point, which is, how divisive is the social cause that you're taking a stance on? So you mentioned like animals and supporting families and education. Those are also, great issues where there's not as much of a division between people. But we have also seen in separate research that, for example, people are really divided on things like gun control or ageism, sizeism, immigration, and those kinds of topics. So that's definitely more risky to speak out on those than on other initiatives of the type that you mentioned, which are more uniting.
Yeah, I know an interesting example. I don't know the brand now, but you have this habit of Black Friday, if I remember correctly, where people go into a shopping frenzy, and a big outdoor company decided to close their website and their shops on Black Friday and say, spend that day outside. And I think that's an interesting way of taking a stance, and I think it's gone pretty viral.
Yes, that was REI. That's correct.
And
I think those can be the most powerful when the consumer sees them as being anything but self-serving. Patagonia, one of REI's competitors, has a campaign that the headline is "Don't buy this jacket," and it's a picture of one of their jackets, and they were promoting that if you have one of their older jackets and it needs a little bit of repair, just send it to them and they will repair it and send it back to you. So those can be very powerful because they are transparently not motivated, at least on the surface.
And that brings us back to the point that it has to be in line with the values of your brand, the perceived values of your brand, and the values of your company. If you put something on top or on the side, people will look through that lack of authenticism and then reject it. I think that's something that we see here as well. Yeah. I'm conscious of time, and I want to one more time remind our audience that they can raise questions in the chat box. I'm absolutely aware that we haven't covered all the aspects that are related to sustainability and brand. And therefore, I would like to point out that the report that Denise has been authoring will be published in December, and you can then find it on the Conference Board website, and you will find a lot more of detail in that report and relevant information for your region or for your sector. So be on the lookout for that report. I would like to take the opportunity to give both of you, Denise and Rick, the opportunity to have a final comment about the sustainability brand equity building we covered today. Denise, would you like to start?
Sure. I think in all of this, what's really, really important is people want to be part of sustainability. They want to be responsible consumers. However, price is an issue and cost. I think with all of this, there is big pressure on companies to make sustainability happen, but in a cost-efficient way. And I think that will be one of the biggest challenges. And also, maybe in addition to being cost-efficient, trying to get people to pay just a little bit more for all these sustainability initiatives. I think that's a big challenge, but also an opportunity through this brand building and emotional attachment and really buying into a brand to be willing to pay a little bit more because of all these sustainability initiatives.
Thank you, Denise. Rick?
No, I would agree, and I would just share that this is something we feel like needs to be closely monitored going forward. Our futures team is constantly scanning for the signals, external trends and so forth that indicate, because it's a bit uncertain where this topic may go. There's some evidence that ultimately we will continue as a society to overconsume and resources will become scarcer and scarcer. But there's an alternative future where widespread protectionism and conservation becomes even more dominant than it is today. And so we just want to make sure we understand in those scenarios, how do we prepare ourselves and our brand to be successful in either environment. So I think it's one of those that the story is still being written every day.
Thank you very much, Rick. From my perspective, I must say I'm very happy that we had this conversation today. I remember, because I've been around for a while, that 20 years ago, that conversation wouldn't have happened. People would have just said that this is not relevant for brand. So things have changed very significantly. And I think we're on a journey here, and people are discovering more and more the opportunities around sustainability rather than just risk and being against a good life. It is the opportunity to bring your life in synchronicity with resources that are available, to live the lives today in a way that future generations still have also that ability to do so. So thank you so much for your contributions. They are very much appreciated. I would like to highlight the fact that our next Webcast is a little bit outside the normal scheme, but we will talk about supply chain transformation, the loop from physical to digital. The reason behind that is also that supply chains are increasingly becoming more transparent, and we want to talk about what practitioners should be aware about these things. So if you're interested in that, that's on Thursday, the 27th of November. On Wednesday, the 27th of November. There's a typo here. And the next Sustainability Watch webcast will be on the 19th of December, where we talk about the plastic ban in China and what it has done to the whole recycling flow and plastics industry around the world and what the implications for business are. Before we close, please fill in the feedback form of this webcast. It will help us to improve our service to you, and that is very much appreciated. For today, I say goodbye and thank you to Denise and Rick.